This is a clip from Beyond Classified. You can access the entire episode now at rockfin.com/FKN+. Right, now you were mentioning how the skies were a much different and probably more terrifying sight for the ancients. I understand that Saturn was one of the, or if not the largest celestial object in view at the time, right?
Yes. I always like during an interview to give a quote from a guy called Eduardo Cardona. He's one of these guys who took the took the torch from Velikovsky and ran with it in terms of Saturn theory. It's him, Dave Talbot, Ev Cochran, Wallace Thornhill. These are the big names in Saturn theory, within the electric universe circles. But Eduardo Cardona, and I quote, says that the evidence of myth which points to Saturn having once occupied a position above Earth's north polar regions is voluminous. There is not a race on Earth that has not preserved at least one account which states as much. According to this evidence, Saturn occupied a central position in the north celestial regions. It rotated and rotated widely, but other than that, it was immovable. End of quote. Now, of course, this is anathema to mainstream science, the idea that the planet Saturn, that is one of the 5 naked eye planets, we've got to keep that in context, that in the ancient times, people could see these 5 wandering stars that became known as the 5 naked eye planets. They are Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, on that order. Saturn is the furthest out. It's a pinprick of light. Yet, if we take its correlation in mythology, we find that mythology gives it this preeminent position at the celestial north. We also find that the north in virtually all world mythologies, especially in the northern hemisphere, but also in some southern hemisphere cultures that have migrated to the southern hemisphere, Polynesian cultures, certain African cultures. The north place where we have the pole star now, that's celestial north, not magnetic north, not geographic north, but celestial north. You've seen photos that show the stars whirling around like a central point in the northern hemisphere, where they turn as the Earth rotates, and such, and it creates kind of like a whirlpool effect with that center point where nothing moves. That's the position that mythology always identified with the abode of the gods, in particular the primal and most important god archetype, which is the Saturn creative god archetype, is associated with the north in virtually every religion. We find even today that most of the temples, pyramids, things of that nature, ancient monuments and monoliths and so on, most of them have a direct orientation towards celestial north. The pyramid is the most perfectly positioned building in terms of celestial north on the planet, even more so than Greenwich, than the Greenwich Observatory here on the Meridian in London. Even Stonehenge, which definitely has relations to the sun, which is not to be confused with Saturn. We'll get into the sun's position and all this, but Stonehenge in Britain is part of a northern line, a northern oriented line of stone circles that go up through the UK, and seems to have been as much oriented towards what they saw in the celestial north, this abode of the gods, Lord of the Rings, that they talk about in the various mythologies, as those stone circles are towards measuring the movements of the sun. So we have all that evidence, and mythologists have known this. They've known this since studying mythology, and when they stepped outside their homes, over the last couple of hundred years and looked up, they, obviously everything that they were reading in mythology did not match what they were seeing up in the skies, knowing full well, as Plato and tells us that the gods of mythology were the wandering stars. They were the stars that bear the names of these gods, as bodies in the skies. These things didn't look anything like the observations of the ancients and so on. Certainly, this idea of Saturn being the most powerful celestial object, more so than the sun, at a time when human beings were on the planet. This made no sense in light of modern science. And so they contrived to turn everything where you've got Saturn, whether it's Egyptian culture, whether it's Roman culture, they've turned it into sun worship. And they've contrived in such a way as to say that what they really meant was the sun that, rises in the east, sets in the west. And they've basically shaped mythology in the last couple of hundred years to reflect that understanding. In Saturn theory, we come along with a very different idea, and where we look at mythology as, being pretty much on the button when it comes to what they were describing. That these are actual witnessed accounts, and we have an explanation for that, which involves the planet Saturn.